Good afternoon to all of you, to the board of directors of the school, the chairman, the principal, the teachers, and the dear students assembled today. First, I must, thank all of you for recognizing Doctors' Day and deciding to celebrate it. Every year we do have this Doctors' Day, in recognition of the work doctors do. This year it's taken a very special prominence thanks to COVID and what we have been going through as a society. And I think the pandemic has brought to all of us, it's brought us very close to illness, it's brought us very close to human suffering, brought us very close to, how difficult it is for, doctors and other healthcare workers, nurses, paramedical professionals, people in the front line to take care of people who are ill in a time like this. So I think it's very appropriate this year that we are thinking about Doctors' Day, and I appreciate the students and teachers and faculty of Vanavani for bringing this to focus among all of you. I'm a former student. I studied in Vanavani for my 11th and 12th standard, and that was 1983-84. So I'm definitely older than all the students, older than most of your parents, and older than many of your teachers, I suspect. It must give you some confidence that the school has been around a long time, and it can turn out reasonably good fellows. Even fellows like me can shape out, once they go through a good school. And I think, I must thank Vanavani for the way it shaped my life and career in the 2 years that I spent there. Because it was after that I went to medical college, of course. But the 2 years that I spent there, I'll tell you what I sort of learned. I was a very average student. And I was a chap who favored the last bench. Very difficult to get me to the front bench. But I was very active in extracurricular activities. And I learned to organize, and I think I learned early leadership skills in those 2 years in Vanavani. It continued into college, and in a way it's continued right through my life. So I must thank the school for that opportunity then. Mrs. Peters was our principal at that time, and I went from being a fellow she was intensely suspicious of when I joined to a person she relied upon by the time I finished. So I must have also done something right in the time that I was there. So, kudos to the school, to the teachers, and to the culture that the school espouses. And I sincerely hope that that culture continues. I picked as my topic for all of you the 21st century mind. Because what the pandemic has also done is it's emphasized for us how important the mind is. It's not just about your body, it's not just about disease, it's not just about survival. It's also about how your mind is helping you stay alive, fighting, and coping at a time like this. So I thought we should talk a little bit today about the importance of the mind in the 21st century. When I was in school, we used to think that people went to psychiatrists only if they were mad. Today, that is certainly not the truth. And many people reach out to mental health professionals for support. And it's got nothing to do with being unwell in your mind. It is got everything to do with wanting to keep your mind in its best shape. And that's really the realization of the 21st century, that a good mind is important in order for someone to function optimally. There was a very interesting project called the Foresight Project on mental well-being in the UK. And it was reported in the very famous journal, Nature, by Professor Bebbington and his colleagues. And what they said based on that project was that countries must learn to capitalize on their citizens' cognitive resources if they are to prosper. You know, we often think about prosperity as economic, but please remember, we live in a knowledge world. And in a knowledge world, cognition, the ability to think, the ability to remember, the ability to connect the dots is probably the most important thing. And if you think about it, the richest countries in the world today, they don't make things, they conceptualize them. Things are made in China and India and Vietnam, right? The concepts come from the most wealthy countries in the world, in the US and the Europe. And that it tells you how important thinking is, how important the mind is for well-being. What they talked about was two things, that countries must be focused on their mental capital, which means your brain health and your mind health. And here I'll stop to talk a little bit about why I'm using brain and mind together. You know, when we say mind, we touch here, manasala, or we say mind here. The truth is, I can do the most fancy scan in the world on all of you. You'll not find the mind. It doesn't exist as a physical entity, right? So what is the mind then? The mind is like your Google Meet. It is virtual. It does not occupy real space. It is the millions of nerves in you talking to each other, the millions of nerves in your brain talking to each other through chemicals. That is your mind. Okay? And what we've learned in the last 30 or 40 years is that it's not just in disease, mental disease, that the mind is, the brain shows changes. The brain can show changes even when you are doing things which are normal things. So the brain behaves in a certain way when you're concentrating. The brain behaves in a certain way when you are appreciating music. The brain behaves in a certain way, believe it or not, when someone falls in love. So you see these changes in your brain, and those changes are reflective of your emotions. So the brain is like the hardware. It's like the instrument you're using to participate in this Google Meet. The mind is your software. It is the Google Meet itself. Okay? And that is the relationship today between the brain and the mind. So for mental capital to be good, you must be in good brain health, which means good preventive health when a child is born, good health for the brain and mind as the child grows up and goes through the educational system, good brain and mind health as an adult, where the responsibility to maintain it falls upon you rather than on teachers and parents, and good brain and mind health as an elder, where it's very important that you preserve it because otherwise you lose it. Please remember, the brain responds to the rule, use it or lose it. So you need to keep using your brain in order to keep it healthy right through your life. And that is the mental capital of any society. There are so many of you. Take that video that you created. It was all your brains working together that made that video happen. In fact, take this program. It's all your brains working together that put this program together. You put in some work to put this together. And that is mental capital. Then there is mental well-being, which is what is affected during the pandemic. Why? Because we are all afraid. We are all frightened. We worry that we may get COVID. We worry that a loved one may get COVID. We wonder what will happen if I fall sick. We wonder what will happen if I go to hospital and need oxygen. That is affecting our mental well-being. Not having those fears, not being worried, being happy is what mental well-being consists of. And what this project told us was that mental capital, good brain health, and mental well-being, good mind health, good mental health, are extremely important for any society in order for society to prosper. Okay? And this I want you to keep in mind, because as students you must understand, today you live and work in a knowledge economy. This is no longer an economy where it's about making things or doing things alone. It is an economy that supports concepts. It's an economy that supports ideas. It's an economy that supports innovation. And if you look at what Uber has done, if you look at things that you take for granted every day, Ola has done, Swiggy has done, Zomato has done. These are concepts and ideas, yet they've become so valuable. And that tells you the kind of economy you as students are growing into. Now, let me take you to another thought process about the mind and why education is important and why what each one of us goes through in school and then in college and then in the workplace is important. Okay, because often when I was a student, I used to wonder, what's the point in going to school? And when I was in the 9th and 10th, for example, and I didn't want to study certain subjects, I used to wonder, why do I have to study these subjects? I don't really like this subject, right? And then in the 11th and 12th, I got to choose, but my choices were restricted. So I still wondered, this 5th subject is something I hate, but I have to do it, right? Now I'll tell you why you have to do it. There's a very famous Harvard psychologist. His name is Howard Gardner, Howard, Gardner. And he's famous as a psychologist who has thought about life, the world, and work, and education, and things like that. He was in Chennai some years ago, so I had the pleasure of actually meeting him and talking to him briefly. Now, he wrote a beautiful book called 5 Minds of the Future. And in that book, he talks about the 5 minds. The first mind, he says, is your disciplined mind. Now, how do you acquire a disciplined mind? It is not by, not like a military drill, by asking you to sit and stand. It is by learning a discipline, by going to school, by studying, by acquiring knowledge in a systematic way. That's how you acquire a disciplined mind, okay? And this takes about a decade or more, 1.5 decades or 2 decades for most of us to master. It requires constant work and it requires formal education. So this is why we go to school. This is why we go to college. This is why all of us study things that we don't really want to study. And this is something I want you to remember. It's very, very important to remember because you may end up doing things that you did not study. I'll give you a very good example. A lot of IIT, IIM guys end up doing finance. They studied engineering, they then studied management, and then what are they doing? They're managing money, which has got nothing to do with the first 2 things. But believe me, the first 2 things are very important in order to do the third thing. So education helps you build a disciplined mind. He then describes what he calls the synthesizing mind. Okay, now what is synthesis? Synthesis is being able to link different sources of information, bring them together. And when you start going to higher classes, when you start going to college, you'll realize that you are connecting the dots with various things that you studied when you were young. You may connect a dot, for example, today, for example, you have talked about Dr. B.C. Roy. Now, that's a snippet from history. Okay? The point I want to make to you is you're talking about B.C. Roy, but you're also talking about medicine, biology. Now, you do this all through your life. You connect the dots about various disparate pieces of information, and that is called synthesis. And that's the synthesizing mind. You integrate information, you identify what jobs need to be done and what people can do those jobs. You look at the priorities and you learn to balance what you want to do with what whoever you're working with is seeking. Some of that you would have done today. I'll give you an example. When you were planning this program, those of you who are involved in planning this program, I'm sure you got some ideas from your teachers. I'm sure you had some ideas of your own. And then you had to put your heads together to think, how do I bring all this together in a way that it actually works? And congratulations, you've done it in a way that actually works. When I looked at your minute by minute, I said to myself, how is this going to finish in 90 minutes? Right? Now I realize that if it doesn't finish in 90 minutes, I'll be solely responsible for that. So it's very important that we synthesize information. What happens after that? The next point he goes on to talk about is the uh, what he calls the creating mind. But before that, let me tell you a couple of stories. The one story I told you was that I myself learned more by doing things in Manavani than I learned from the classroom, by organizing things. Now you will be surprised to hear this. I'm not alone. There's a beautiful book called the IITians. Okay, this is about people from IIT who've gone on to do wonderful things in life. One of them is my classmate, Venki Harinarayan, who went on to build this company called Junglee.com, which he then sold to Microsoft for a lot of money many years ago. He's one of the first tech entrepreneurs and tech billionaires. He's from Manavani, by the way. He got the 43rd rank in that year in the IIT exam, and we were together in school. Now, the point is, what the book says, most of these guys who made it, when they were in IIT, it's not that they spent all their time studying. They were very active. They took part in extracurricular activities. They were part of the debating clubs. They were part of some sporting clubs. They were part of drama. They did many things. Another very interesting fact, which I must tell you, a survey of 50 top entrepreneurs in the world showed that 90% came from a humanities background, not from a tech background. Okay, so the point is, diversity is very important. Please remember this. And that's why synthesis is very important. Now, what is then the creative mind? Now, I'll tell you my own journey. When I studied medicine, then I went to England and I studied neurology in England. I studied psychiatry in India and then went to England and studied neurology in England. And my earliest jobs were as part of a multidisciplinary team. A few people working together to look after a sick person, like a sick person with epilepsy. And I learned that I don't have to work alone. I can actually work as part of a team. This is something I had not done in India. I had not been exposed to very much in India. When I came back to India after my training abroad, I said, let me set up a team like that myself. And I went on and set up a team like that myself. I was the doctor. I had psychologists with me. I had physiotherapists with me, occupational therapists with me, speech therapists with me, and a nutritionist with me. And we started doing a multidisciplinary clinical service. We ran the service in two places. One is a non-profit hospital called VHS, very near to IIT. And the other is in my own clinic, which was in Mylapore then. It's now in Tenapet. So we ran this multidisciplinary service. And we were doing very well. We liked what we were doing. We learned to work as a team. I could bring all those principles that I learned abroad to my work here. Then in a few years, I realized that patients would come to me and say, you know what, doctor, what you're doing for me is very good. But I went and had Ayurveda and I am feeling so much better. I started doing yoga. I'm feeling so much better. I started having acupuncture. I'm feeling so much better. And in the beginning, my modern scientific mind said, this is all nonsense, the placebo effect. These guys are just feeling good because somebody did something to them. Then I started asking myself, is that really true? Or is this just me being prejudiced? So one day, I got bitten by the bug. I said, let me set up an integrative health system. So I went and rented a house near in my locality where I lived. I went and invited an Ayurveda doctor I knew whose father was my patient to start a clinic with me. I brought in all my team, the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, the psychologist, and everybody else there. And we suddenly had an integrative health clinic going. And believe it or not, patients were very happy. They started enjoying this. And therein started my entrepreneurial journey. The person who introduced me said that I was the founder of Buddhi Clinic. And that's what Buddhi Clinic is. It's an integrative health system that looks after the brain and mind. We have 14 treatments from brain stimulation to Ayurveda, to physiotherapy, to yoga, all kinds of things. You can come in and choose, and we'll help you choose what will work for you. And that is the creating mind, where you open yourself to ideas and you are willing to embrace and integrate things that you're not familiar with things that you've not learned to be confident about into your system. And so that's the third mind. The fourth mind he talks about is the respectful mind. Now, what's the respectful mind? He says it's important we accept people for who they are and what they are. He says it's important we learn to empathize with people. What's empathy? Empathy is for me to be able to put myself in your shoes, for you to be able to put yourself in my shoes. Today, all of you have put yourselves in our shoes. You've said that, we want to celebrate Doctors' Day because we understand you guys are having a bad year. You guys have taken a lot of risks by being in the front line. And we would like to, acknowledge that. So that's empathy. And he says empathy is important. He also says it's important that we are worthy of each other's trust. Okay? So when you call someone like me to come and speak to you, you trust them to do a reasonable job. You trust them to add some value to what you're trying to organize. And if they don't prepare and they don't come and add that value, you're going to be disappointed. Your trust in them goes down. So trust is when people respect what you're doing and try to do the converse, show you that respect. And of course, very, very important ultimately in life, to be able to take that leap of faith when it is required. If you don't take risks, if you don't take the leap of faith that is required, you will yourself not help your own potential to be achieved. Okay, so it's very important that you train your mind to think like that as well. Now, one very important point I want to bring to you here is the fifth mind. The fifth mind that he talks about is the ethical mind. And what is the ethical mind? I'm very proud of you guys, the young generation, because I believe that your sense of ethics is far greater than my generation. I see many of you question the need for gas-guzzling cars. I see many of you being very concerned about your environment. I see many of you wanting to avoid wasteful practices. All these are very, very ethical things to do. It means that we understand our duties and obligations to our organization. For you, all of you as students, it is to your school, to your families, to society as a whole. This is an ethical mind. You need to understand what is expected of you by other people. John F. Kennedy said, it's not what America does for you, it's what you do for America. So, okay, paraphrase that, it's what you do for India. And each one of you needs to think about that. And you need to understand and learn to appreciate ethical values. I listened to a wonderful talk yesterday in the Madras Management Association, day before. It's the Pons lecture, the V. Narayan lecture, given by Mr. Harish Menwani, who retired as the Chief Operating Officer of Unilever, which is one of the largest companies in the world. Now, he said something very, very interesting. He said the one thing about COVID-19 is those companies that behave with integrity are the companies that will survive and be remembered. Those companies that fail to behave with integrity are the ones that are going to collapse. Now, this is integrity, therefore, being true to what you stand for is a very, very important human value, and it's part of that ethical mind. Let me give you one more example, the example of Ratan Tata. When he started the Nano project, Ratan Tata said, I'll give the people of India a car for 1 lakh. When he actually brought the car to the showroom, it costed the company much more than 1 lakh to make. But when he was asked why he was still giving it to the first set of people who booked it for 1 lakh, he said, a promise is a promise. And I think that is a very clear reflection of integrity. Okay? So that is the ethical mind that we are talking about. So please remember, you're now in the disciplined mind time frame. As you go to higher classes and go to college, you will start synthesizing. Early in your work, you will start synthesizing. Then, when you get exposed to the world, especially the working universe, that's when you get an opportunity to create. My patients telling me that, doctor, I feel better after I got Ayurveda, was my opportunity to create. I asked myself, why are we not doing for them what they want? Why are we asking them to go somewhere else? And that was a creative opportunity. I'm sure the guy who developed Uber similarly thought, why can't I have, my taxi on a phone? Why do I have to phone a number to call a taxi? And so on, right? And why does a taxi have to be a taxi? Why can't ordinary people drive cars and earn money for it? And that is the whole concept of the Uber. So that's the creative mind. When you work somewhere, when you work alongside other people, you develop a respectful mind. And please remember, those of you who wish to be leaders, those of you who want to get to the top of organizations, those of you who wish to leave a mark on the world. Steve Jobs famously said, the creator of Apple, he famously said, I want to put a ding in the universe. What he meant was he wanted to put a dent in the universe, right? But if you want to put a ding in the universe, you also have to be ethical. And so those are the 5 minds of Howard Gardner, which I want to leave you with as a thought process. So far I've talked to you about mental capital, good brain health, mental well-being, good mental health, and the 5 minds of Howard Gardner. And I would think that each of these things is very, very important for all of us. Now let me talk to you about 2 other concepts. In the old days, we used to measure IQ, intelligence quotient. We still do it. Okay. Problem with IQ tests, they are very mathematically weighted. So a person who's got good mathematical intelligence will actually score very high on an IQ test. Okay. And a person whose mathematical intelligence is poor will score poorly on an IQ test. The other problems with our IQ tests are they tend to be very weighted by education, how many years you've spent in school. They tend to be very weighted by language. If you studied a regional language, you may not do as well in an IQ test because most of them are developed in English. So IQ as a concept has become questionable over time because it's not an accurate reflection of what happens in society. Then you think about the people who became successful, who were terribly intelligent, but did very poorly in school and college. Okay, so Bill Gates dropped out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Einstein dropped out of college. In fact, his teachers in school didn't think that he was fit enough to even go to college, right? So we have many examples of super smart people who did not, the educational system did not think they were very smart. And this is a reflection of our IQ mindset. We think about intelligence as a certain thing. What we have learned over time in the last 20 or 30 years is that there is another form of intelligence that's very important for human success. It's called EQ, emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. Now, let me tell you why this is important. When you deal with people, you need to be able to feel what they are feeling, hear what they are hearing, respond to them appropriately. High IQ doesn't guarantee you will do any of that. High EQ does. Okay? So, your ability to perceive and respond to other people's emotions is a very important predictor of your success, whether it's in college, whether it's in the workplace, whether it is anywhere else. And that's what EQ is all about. Now, these are 2 disparate concepts, IQ and EQ. But I want to introduce you to one more thought about intelligence, again from Howard Gardner. What Howard Gardner points out is that we all have many intelligences. Okay? And here let me tell you a story about my own 15-year-old son who's in the 11th standard. He, like many of those who were in the 10th standard last year, did not have an exam. But a few days before his supposed exam, and the exams had not been cancelled, I came out of my room into the TV lounge and I found he was watching A Midsummer Night's Dream. Two things surprised me. That a few days before the exam, this guy is watching a movie. The second thing that surprised me was he was watching Midsummer Night's Dream. It's not the kind of movie he would watch. He's the kind of chap who will watch anime or something else. Then I realized Midsummer Night's Dream is the classic that he's supposed to read for his English exam. And he likes to learn by watching the TV. He likes to learn by watching the movie rather than reading the book. And I said to myself, okay, that's not so bad. As long as he's learning something from this and he's able to take his exams reasonably well, that's fine. And I let it go. But it reminded me of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. So what does Howard Gardner say? That we have the following forms of intelligence. Linguistic, intelligence with language and words. Some of us are good with language and words. We like reading, we like writing, we enjoy it. Musical intelligence. Some of us are good with music, either appreciate it or we perform it well. Okay. Logical intelligence. Some of us have a very logical mind. We have the ability to break things down very well. We have the ability to follow or develop process. That's the logical mind. Okay. Spatial intelligence. Some of us understand spaces, like architects. What can go in where, or a designer. What will fit in here? Which color will match this? Okay, that's spatial. Bodily kinesthetic, movement. Some of us are good sportsmen. Some of us are good, or sportswomen. Some of us are good when it comes to dance. That's movement intelligence. Naturalistic. Some of us like nature. We like geography. We like farms. We like being in touch with animals. Naturalistic intelligence. Interpersonal. Some of us get along well with other people. We enjoy being with other people. We enjoy interacting with other people. Intrapersonal. Some of us have a good understanding of ourselves. We are able to introspect. We are able to think. We are able to sort things out inside our head. Okay. Now, these are 8 kinds of intelligences that Howard Gardner described. And please remember, we all have all of these in some degree, but 2-3 of these will be very strong in each one of us. Okay. And in order to do well in life, you need to pick the ones that work for you. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're a student and let's say that you have musical intelligence. What can you do? How can you leverage your musical intelligence as a student? I know many people, even when I was studying as a student, who would like to listen to music as they studied. And I used to wonder, how can you listen to music and study? Because when I listen to music, I can't study. Nothing goes into my head. But for them, it clearly did. And some of them would even associate songs that they heard with certain pieces of knowledge that they gained. You know, I was listening to this song when I learned this. Okay. So that is one way in which you can use your intelligence to make what you're doing routinely as part of your life better. And you need to therefore identify your intelligences, and you need to, please remember, leverage on your intelligences in order to do well. Okay. Now, what Howard Gardner says, and I think that this is a very, very important point. It's not how smart you are, it's how you are smart. And that is the 21st century mind. Please remember today you have YouTubers who are worth millions of dollars. Why? Because that's their talent and they've learned how to express that talent. So they are a very good example of when you have talent and you know how to express it, you can do very well for yourself. And I think I would encourage each one of you to think about what it is that your mind is making you do. What is it that your mind is persuading you to do? And believe me, if anyone tells you that you're not smart, don't believe them. Every one of us is smart in our own way. And we just need to discover that smartness. So I'm going to let all of you think about in what way are you smart. Okay. I'm coming to the end of what I have to say. So let me talk about one other thing. The government of India always announces 5-year plans. At least they used to when I was growing up. And the 5-year plans of government are never implemented in 5 years. There is a vision, but that vision never gets executed. But there's something important there. You too must have a 5-year plan. It's extremely important for your life and career that you know what you want to achieve in 5 years. Okay. And then set your goals as to how you're going to do that. If you don't know what you want in 5 years, it's very hard to then plan and work towards it. So do think about, where do I want to be at the end of 5 years? And that's a very important question to ask yourself. And when it comes to goals, please remember your goals need to be SMART goals. What's a SMART goal? S, specific. A goal has to be specific. I want to do well is not a specific goal. I want to score more than 90% is a specific goal, right? M, a goal has to be measurable. You need to be able to quantify it. What I gave you earlier as an example is also a measurable goal. Okay. Third, a goal has to be attainable. So don't set goals for yourself that are impossible to attain. Always set goals for yourself that are possible to attain. Okay? Which brings us to the fourth, R, realistic. Your goals must be realistic. And 5, T, your goals must be time bound. Okay, I said 5 years. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound are what your goals have to be. And if you set yourself those goals with a 5-year vision, I have no doubt that each one of you who's endowed with a 21st century mind, fellows like me are too old. Ours is a 20th century mind which is kicking around in the 21st century, right? Many of you are genuine 21st century minds. So I'm very sure that you will do very, very well if you put your focus in this way, okay? Now, I ask myself, why are people making such a big deal of Doctor's Day? I also ask myself, people keep saying you're on the front line. What does this front line mean? And I thought on Doctor's Day, I must tell you a little bit about this because it's important you understand what healthcare professionals in general, not just doctors, go through. Think about how you react when you know that your neighbor is COVID positive, right? You close the door of your flat. You don't want to meet that neighbor, right? And, if you're unlucky and 3-4 more people in your building have got COVID, then the government comes and closes the whole building down, right? It's called a containment zone, right? So that's how we as society are reacting to a pandemic. That's how we are reacting to a communicable disease, something that can go from one person to the other. Okay? So why is someone like me called frontline? I come to work every day right through the pandemic. Nobody ever stopped me from coming to work. And those patients who wanted to see me had to come to see me. So I've been at work every day during the pandemic. I wear masks. So I double mask. Okay. I have windows open in my room. Usually I've closed them now for this thing because I don't want noise. I have the air condition running. I have the fan running. So mine are fairly optimal conditions in order to meet people. But I get into my room several people every day. I don't ask whether they are COVID positive or not. I don't know whether they are COVID positive or not. They themselves sometimes don't know if they are COVID positive. Some of them have just recovered from COVID and they've come to me with neurological symptoms or mental health symptoms. So the point is, frontline warriors, even someone like me who's only running an outpatient clinic, are taking daily risks that most people are not willing to take in order to perform their duties. Now, I don't consider what I'm doing a big deal. Okay, it's my job. Okay, and that's the attitude you need to have as a doctor. You can't think of it as a big deal. But I appreciate my colleagues, doctors in ICUs, emergency rooms, nurses, attenders, lab technicians, the people who are working right out there in front, who are encountering people, mostly not knowing whether this person is a safe person to encounter or not. Encountering several such people. Okay? So that is one reason why we need to pay our respects to the healthcare fraternity as a whole during a pandemic like this. But there's one other point I want to emphasize to you. You know, when the pandemic started, for many days, I did not sleep in the same room as my wife. I was afraid I'll give her something. And please remember, I have the privilege of having another room to go and sleep in. Imagine a healthcare professional who lives in a one or two room space. Where is their privilege? They're taking home their infections with them to their families, to the elders in their house, to the children in their house, to their spouses. And that is the risk they've had to take. And that is something we should not forget, that we are able to manage our fears and control our behaviors. Those people who have to function at the front line don't have this opportunity. And if you think about it, it is no different from sending a soldier out to war. The reason we appreciate our army and navy and air force is because they're putting their life at risk for us. Okay? Healthcare professionals in a time like this, like the pandemic, have put their lives at risk for all of us continuously. And I think that that is one of the reasons that you guys have chosen to celebrate Doctors' Day. And that's one of the reasons why I have the opportunity to have spent this day with you. And I join you in paying my respects to the COVID-19 warriors. Now, there's one other point I want to make. Some of you may want to become doctors, nurses, medical and healthcare professionals. All power to you. You are going to be a very, very useful member of this community and society. Believe me, the one you always get is a lot of respect. Okay? Your colleagues may make a lot more money than you, especially in the initial years. Healthcare professionals don't get headhunted by, IBM or TCS or Microsoft. They end up going to work in hospitals and clinics for small sums of money to begin with. But believe me, it all evens out in the long term. Because in the long term, teachers, healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, others, and all those people who serve you every day, who keep society running, these are the people who get a lot of respect from society, a lot of regard from society, a lot of allowances from society, which makes life that much more living. Now,